Okay, so thank you again for sticking around and coming over to part 2 of learning how to use the Behringer X32 console. In this episode, we will be showing you how to use patching and routing inside the console. Now, since this is a 16/32 channel console, we have 16 inputs and 8 outputs on the back. On the bigger console, we have 32 inputs and 16 outputs. So the bigger console essentially is a double of what the compact console is. Now, to get into the routing, you will go over to the 8 buttons over here and click on Routing. Now, routing will bring you to a page that shows your inputs, your external inputs, your external outputs, your user-defined inputs, your patch points, and where all of your buses and everything else is going to migrate to. Now, up at the top, we see input, AES50A, AES50B, card, and XLR. Outputs, auxiliaries, P16s, and user-defined inputs. So, with this console, we have 16 channels in the back here. So we can use faders 1 through 16 to do what we need to do. If we needed another 16 channels, we can buy a stage box, which I will put a picture of here. And they come in 16 channels or 32 channels. So you can do a full 32 channel stage box with 16 outputs if you're running everything on stage. Here, with the new update, which is Behringer 4.0, we are able to use user-defined inputs, which allows us to pull a few inputs from stage, pull a few inputs from the console, pull a few inputs from the cards. Basically, you have full flexibility channel by channel instead of banks of 8 like it used to be. So on here right now, we have locals 1 through 8 and locals 9 through 16. 1 through 8, 9 through 16. Since we don't have 17 to 24 or 25 to 32, they are set on the AES-A. So they are AES-A 1 through 8 and AES-A 9 through 16. So you may be confused. Why does it say 1 through 8 and 9 through 16 when I'm already taking locals from here? Well, that's no big deal. AES-A is thinking that it is 1 through 16. So knowing that it's 1 through 16, the console is going to say that it is 1 through 16. If we were using a 32 channel stage box, we would go AES50 from 1 through 8 all the way to 32. We'd go AES-A 1 through 8, AES-A 9 through 16, AES-A 17 to 24, and AES-A 25 to 32. That would be able to use our external stage box to get all of our channels that we needed. If you have 2 stage boxes, now for instance, we use 2 S16 stage boxes, 1 in our booth and 1 on stage, to be able to move our console into the house when we are running a show, so we can hear levels instead of being behind a pane of glass and not being able to hear them. So our stage boxes have a stage and a booth. So we have A and we have B. So we're using both of the inputs on the back here instead of local hard patching everything that we need to patch. That's convenient, so that when we move this down, all we have to do is plug in 2 cables and power, and we have all 32 channels with 16 channels of outputs. We also use P16s. Now, in the routing, if we scroll over, we will hit the P16 section. Now, that is the Ultranet, as Behringer calls it. But it's very convenient because you can give a musician an actual device and they can adjust the levels of each of the channels that they want to hear. So for a band, we'll normally put some of the instruments and we'll put as many people as we can fit on that channel strip. So we have 16 Ultranet outputs, which means 16 little knobs. Now I'll put a picture of that right here to show you what a P16 looks like. It's a very convenient device. If you're really tired of mixing buses and it's constant, they're never right. Something changes, somebody doesn't want this, somebody doesn't want that. Well, you're at the mercy of how many inputs and how many speakers you have to make dedicated mixes. So The P16s are completely configurable. Each musician has 16 channels to choose from that they can listen to in their headphones and be able to adjust the dials of each of the persons, each of the instruments, and everything else they want to hear. I think it's super convenient, definitely worth the investment. And then you hear less from the band. They kind of control themselves, and they're fairly happy with it. Moving over, you have your user-defined inputs. Now, your user-defined inputs allow you to go from all 32 channels in AES50A, AES50B, and local in. So you have 3 places where you can select channels from. So if I wanted channel 1 to be AES50A, which is our stage, but I wanted something from our booth to be plugged in, well, I can say 1 can be from the stage, 2 can be from the booth, and then 3, 4, and if I wanted them to be local, so if I wanted 3 through 8 to be local, well, then they stay local. But I can choose exactly where I want my channels coming in from. That's something that you couldn't do before. You had to do in banks of 8. So you only had 4 groups of where you could take signal in. Now you basically have 32 different groups, so you can take signal from wherever you want to go. So very convenient. The routing also has to do with the bus mixes up here. So this is really where you can send your main left and right outputs. Moving back into routing, you have your auxiliaries. So if you are using compressors or different things that need to plug in, you can use them through here. Our outs. So on here, you may see, if you have a full size, you won't see any asterisks. But if you have a compact, you will only see 1 through 8, which is your outputs. 9 through 16 have an asterisk next to them because you don't have them locally. So you have 8 outputs, so you can have 6 buses and a main left and right, which makes everything really convenient. Last but not least, you have your XLR outputs, so outputs 1 through 4 and 5 through 8. You can decipher where you want them to go. And your card, this is a card. It's actually replaceable. You can choose from 3 different options. I know one is a Toslink. I think one is a Dolby card. And then this is in 32 ins and 32 outs. So if you did want to use virtual instruments, you can use virtual instruments through this console and use all 32 channels, as well as your auxiliary channels. So thank you for sticking through part 2. I hope this explained the routing and everything that kind of goes with it. Routing is the most complicated thing to do on a console just because there's a lot of things coming in and a lot of things going out, and some things can get switched, but as long as you play around with it, everything's easy. This console's very easy to use. So stick around for part 3. We'll be going over channel naming and everything to do with channels. So from naming to EQs to configuring and everything that you need to know about channels in the next part. I'll see you then.